Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, we have someone that we probably never had in the past touching this particular subject, and he's an expert at it. Mr. Eddie Speed, thank you so much for being here today, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing amazing, Eddie. You know, after all the technical setbacks that we both faced in the last 10 minutes, we're live. So, hey, but that's what life is all about, is right. How do you pivot and adjust, and how do you move forward to achieve the goals that we're all supposed to be achieving, right? So,
Yeah.
with no further ado, Eddie, who are you? Where do you come from? Were you always that rich?
Yeah.
Do you come from a very wealthy family, or, how do you get into this world of real estate?
Well, I came in a long time ago. I'm an old guy now. I was not an old guy then. I actually started in this industry at 20 years old. So I have a heart for people getting started, but I have, it's been a journey. And so I think, what we now try to help people do helps people along the way in the journey. Not maybe quite so much for the brand new guy, but although I started, in that way. So in 1980, I met a guy, later became my father-in-law, and he says, I'm going to teach you how to buy notes.
So you started with notes from the get-go.
I did. Most people that are in the note business started out in real estate. I actually started out buying notes.
Wow.
So in 1980, it was a high inflationary time. Interest rates were high. Financing was very tough. And so a lot of people were seller financing property. And so I learned the business kind of, to most people, backwards. I learned buying notes first, and then I later learned things about real estate. But I am, at my core, a note guy. And my wife and I married in 82 and moved from Mississippi, where we were both from, to Dallas-Fort Worth to come to buy notes. And so it's been a journey. And I'm the first guy ever literally to drop mail and say, hey, I want to buy your asset.
Wow.
In my case, I was trying to buy a note. I did that in 1982. So people dropping mail to buy houses wasn't a thing. Nobody had ever thought about it. I stumbled into it and figured out that the mortgage or the deed of trust was recorded in the courthouse. We could go scrape courthouse data and go get a name of somebody that might want to sell their note. And so we kind of pioneered that idea back then. So I've had a machete in my hand a lot of my young career.
Wow, that's impressive. So let's go back to moving from Mississippi to Dallas-Fort Worth. Why Dallas? Why not Mississippi at the time?
Population. Yeah. There was a guy already in Houston that was an independent contractor from my father-in-law's firm. I could have either moved to Atlanta or to Dallas. That was kind of the two chosen choices. And I chose Dallas, and that turned out to be the right choice because Dallas is kind of a financial center. And 25% of all seller financing in the entire United States is generated in the state of Texas. And I think a lot of it is we taught people how to do seller financing here.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily true back then. It's just been true for the past 20 years. And I think it's because we created an awareness and a knowledge about how to do it. And I think that kind of catapulted itself out.
What do you remember about your first note?
I was just a bird dog, really. I mean, I went out and found notes and took them to my father-in-law. I laugh and tell people I thought a loan was being by myself, right? I didn't know anything. And so I brought a deal to him, and it happened to be a pretty big operator. And he kind of sold a note for tax purposes, ironically. And pretty interesting. And so I remember that being the very first deal. And the guy started talking to me about like some fairly unusual structure. Clearly, I would have known it in the past 30 years, but I didn't know it in the first year or so. And he had an idea about how to do it. And my father-in-law completely understood it. And so I started out in the business with nothing but shoe leather. I lived in a 10 by 40 mobile home. in a KOA campground. And my father-in-law had the money and the knowledge. All I could bring was the hustle. But I did have that.
So what were his instructions, Eddie? Go door knock or go
That's
find
what
this.
I really did. Yes, sir. I went and door knocked. I went and called on realtors and home builders. And this is in 1980, very different era,
Right.
right? But I went and called on real estate offices and home builders and real estate investors and just knock on the door. This is 1980, so things were very different back then. With a business card and a smile and say, I buy notes. And believe it or not, I got through a lot of doors. I learned to be nice to the receptionist and not goofy and not flirty and acting like a fool, but just being respectful but friendly and approachable. And the next thing I know, I'd be in the door of the kind of the biggest guys in Mississippi, from Jackson all the way to Mississippi Gulf Coast. That's what got me started. And the fact that what really kind of amazed my father-in-law is I didn't give up, because I had like zero success in the first 60 days. You send me out, like I'd have to drive to the location. So it might be an hour and a half to get there. And I was there by 8:30 in the morning. I'd work all day and leave at 5 and then drive back to his house and debrief with him in the evening. And 60 days later, I wasn't whining. He said, shit, I think I got something.
Yeah. So, yeah, most people, they want that overnight success, right? Or I mean, it took me a whole year to find my first flip.
Yeah.
And so I just never gave up on it. Um which is what, in a way, it takes for all the different lanes that we have in real estate, whether it's note investing or wholesaling or fixing flipping.
Yeah.
So what are the notes? To me is a world that I know very little about, right? Even though I've created notes, because
Yeah.
I don't own financing, I've
Yeah.
taken over subject to properties, things like that.
Yeah.
Um but
So
what
in the early days, all I knew to do was to sit there and be the catcher. I didn't have anything to do with the pitcher. I was just the catcher. So people would bring me deals and I'd try to figure out how to unwind them, repaper them, restructure them. They didn't have underwriting. It wasn't structured the right way. So a guy calls me in probably 1987 and says, my brother and I are in real estate investors and we created some notes and let's go look at them. So back then we'd load up in the car. I buy notes all across the country all the time, and I don't necessarily make a field trip to go look at 2 or 3 notes anymore, but I did back then.
right?
And I rode with him in the car. That guy's name was Ken D'Angelo. Know who that is?
I don't.
He founded Homevestors.
Okay.
And so Kenny D'Angelo and I rode all, day in the car and went and had Texas barbecue. We had to drive about an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to these properties. We really built a bond. So about 3 years later, Ken called me and says, I'm going to build a franchise and for house real estate investors, and I need a note guy. And he said, everybody I talk to says you are the most, consistent, squared away note guy that they know. And so he said, but here's the thing about it. I'm building a franchise. People have got to know how to build a hamburger. So nobody had ever taken this concept anywhere. And basically he and I started out with 6 whiteboards and 6 easels. And every Saturday morning for about 90 days, we wrote a system for their franchisees to create notes to a formula, to a recipe that I gave them. And that changed the note business.
Wow.
It revolutionized the note business. We went from the whole industry in the whole United States did about $70 million worth of notes a year. And within 3 years, the industry was doing north of 300 million.
Wow.
So we taught Homevestors how to do it, and then we got copied. And by the way, whoever influenced you in Houston might have been 5 tiers down, but it was probably from that really that's how, it became common to you, because it's common in Houston. And by the way, we bought more notes from some franchisees in Houston than in any other market.
I'm thinking who I learned even the term notes. It might have been Ray Sasser, who you know very well, and the guy. Oh my God! How come I don't forget? I don't remember his name right now. He's out of Canyon Lakes.
Mitch.
Mitch Stevens, right?
So
So
I taught Mitch was doing it, but he wasn't doing it right. So I taught Mitch how to do notes
all right.
so that you could sell them in the secondary market. By the way, you want to hear something crazy funny?
What's that?
That became obsolete for 20 years.
What,
Like,
selling notes?
yeah, like people like this, the deal that we did all through the 90s. And I bought 50,000 owner finance
Wow.
notes, right? You want to know how I bought 50,000 owner finance notes? I built a manufacturing system. I taught people how to manufacture notes that could trade in the secondary market for the most money. You can do it another way, but when I take your loans to an insurance company or a bank or a hedge fund, they're going to laugh at them.
Right.
But if you do it the way I do it, I'm using their underwriting standards to help you go create the note. And now, Ricardo, I make you a mortgage banker. And by the way, people say, why do I care about that? Money, lots more money.
Yeah, because some notes may not be sellable, right? If they're not created correctly.
Look, I bought 50,000 notes, and Lord knows I probably looked at 400,000. So more people do notes wrong than right. And just because somebody says they taught you how to do it doesn't mean they actually really taught you how to do it.
Let's talk about that. I like that. So what are the do's and don'ts, right? From a 10,000 foot view of doing notes correctly or incorrectly, Eddie?
All right. So first of all, it's the structure of the sale. What is an appropriate down payment? And how do you structure the mortgage? Do you do a first and a second? Do you do just a first? Do you do all of those things is really how you do it. And what's an appropriate down payment that fits the credit of the buyer? Like an ITIN buyer should have a different down payment than somebody with an 800 credit score. I don't mean you can't do an ITIN buyer. I just mean it can't be the same. So understand that this is what you get into over and over and over is like people needed a recipe. Listen, you call a lender and you say, will you make me a loan? And they go like, I don't know. We don't know if we'll make a loan or not. Like, we're just going to make up the lending criteria as soon as we start looking at your deal. No, that's not how they do it at all. What they do is they say, here's our underwriting box. Here's your debt to income ratio. Here's your credit. Here's all of these things. And from these things, then that is how we can do it. So that's how people learn to create good notes. It's not accidental. And I don't care if you've done 1,000 houses, 100 houses, or 5,000 houses. I've looked at more seller financing. I'm safely going to say I've seen more of it than anybody in the country, right? I've been doing it 45 years. And I can tell you right now that I don't accidentally see somebody walk in my door and I'm like, good God, how did you know how to structure all these deals? They just said, I just intuitively knew how to do it. I've never heard that in 45 years. So that is where I saw a real go give connection. Whether it was Homevestor franchisees or Mitch Stephen or anybody else, how do you make good notes? And knowing how to make good notes then means that you can take the note to the secondary market. And there's it's financially like insanely more valuable to do it that way. And that's kind of been my niche.
Well, because you are creating a true asset, right?
You're lending. You're a mortgage banker.
Right. Now, do you have to be licensed to do that?
No, but you need a license. And so you have to rent the license. I don't have to be a lawyer to go to court. I just have to hire a lawyer, right? I can do my own tax returns, but most people choose to hire somebody with a license to do their tax returns. And so you can hire out the residential mortgage loan originator, RMLO. So a lot of people call them LOs, loan originators.
Right.
Right. And so you hire that out. And that gives you the freedom to go not have to have the license because it's compliance. And unless you did it every day, you wouldn't know how to be compliant. But you can hire it done. Here's what's a lot of times, Ricardo, is that's not correctly said. And that is people say, the RMLO has the underwriting. No, they don't. They're following your underwriting, right? It's your loan. You're the one that's doing it. They're just acting on your behalf. Now they have to make sure it's compliant with the law, but they got to make sure that you do it right, not do it wrong. And we see this a lot, right? Somebody says, well, the RMLO underwrote it. And I'm like, I don't know if they don't know how to sell loans to insurance companies. They have no idea what their criteria would be.
Right. I did a seller financing on my own house actually back in 2020, and the buyer had a good credit score, but he had a bankruptcy in the previous 3 years, and it was very something weird. The bankruptcy had to do with the medical bills of his mother, so it wasn't even a problem of his. It was maybe he co-signed for the medical bills, and when you have when a close person to you is in the deathbed, you're gonna sign whatever paperwork there is in order to keep this person alive, right? So his case was like that, but um, he couldn't qualify for a regular loan at the time because he had that bankruptcy in place, and it only had been a couple of years. So he had to wait like 2 or 3 years for him in order for him to get qualified for a loan. So I wanted to sell the property, and I said, "Look, do you have any down payment?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got enough money." I think he had like 20% down on it was like on a $600,000 home. That was a pretty good chunk of change. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "You know what? I'll take your 20% all day long with your bankruptcy. I have no issues with it because you got a 700 plus credit score. You've been paying your bills on time, and you have a good job. You make good income. The guy used to make multiple six figures as a consultant, and I'm gonna actually give you a pretty favorable rate because if I went and charged an ungodly rate on a house like that, his payments would have been completely out of his range." And but I did use an RMLO, and I remember when I got the RMLO, I forgot their name. I think it's Texas something. They're the ones that called me up and said, "Hey, Ricardo, this guy has a bankruptcy. What do you want to do about it?" And I was like, honestly, not much, because he's giving me 20% down payment, and he's putting enough skin on the game to where I'm okay, with accepting this risk. I understood I was the bank, so the RMLO, the only thing they did was make me aware of what was going on in his credit, and it was up to me whether I wanted to continue with the transaction or not at that time, which I had already agreed to it. Well, long story short, we did that loan, and I was able to owner finance the home to him. And 2.5 years later, he was already refining me out because now he qualified for a more favorable rate. So
Yeah.
I remember I owner financed it for 5.8 something percent, and he was able to get like a 3% rate. When they were giving the money away a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, but I did
Let me,
what I
before you
could.
leave that, let me make a statement to you.
Yes.
Okay. The RMLO job was not to pull the credit or not to invest in bankruptcy. They should do that too, but I'm
Right.
just telling you by state statutes, that is not their job.
Okay.
Their job is to verify their income, their ability to pay.
And they did. Yeah, they did. So
I just didn't want to leave that part. The most important part by law is that they verified the guy can afford it.
they did. They say, yeah, this guy has the money. He actually had an IRA with more money in it. Coming to find out later on, and
It was here's what I would call it, Ricardo. It was a make sense credit exception, right?
that is correct. And I wanted to get out of that property too, Eddie. So
Yeah,
it was a win-win.
yeah,
He got a good deal. I got out of it. I had enough equity in it where I could take the money and move away from that particular property. It was a beautiful family as well. So I was thinking about, man, this man has a wife and a couple of little kids that now they're going to live in the home that my wife and I built, because we built it from the ground up. So we knew we were moving away from a property and leaving it in good hands. And
that's what I like to hear. You created home ownership.
that is correct. And don't get me wrong, he came from being a homeowner, so he had another home. He was just upgrading his lifestyle pretty much, right? And he actually told me one day on the phone, he said, Ricardo, I love your property. I it's like the house of my dreams. He sold it to me. He's like, let me buy this. If you need more down payment, I can come up with more money. And then at the time I was like, hey, man, you're giving me 20% down already. Yeah, I love to take up more, but you know what? Let's just work together and make this a win-win. And we created a win-win. And I think, Eddie, in your line of business, like real estate, right? Note investing, it's about win-win-win
I agree with that.
and doing it correctly. Because at the end of the day, if you create a note that you cannot sell, was that really a win-win?
Well, I mean, people have all kind of thoughts in their head, right? They think I don't want to sell the note. I don't need to sell the note unless life circumstances change. So a lot of people show up at my doorstep down the road. They said, I didn't think I'd ever sell this note, but now I do. And like, or they don't know to do this. Like, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but I'm just saying to you that there's gurus out there teaching creative financing and seller financing every day that have done very little selling notes in the secondary market, if any at all. And I've done 50,000. So I kind of feel like, I can really help somebody with this. And I've seen people misguided, a lot of misadvice about how to do it. And now all of a sudden we've come full cycle, right? So there was seller financing in the 80s. And that for a lot of your audience, that's beyond what they can think about, but it solved a problem, right? Interest rates were 18% interest, conventional mortgages.
Yeah.
Then we saw seller financing all through the 90s. And that's when Mitch did it a lot. It's when Homevestor franchisees did it a lot. When Ray Sasser did a lot. All of those guys, knew me extremely well. And I had a pretty decent footprint into how things were done, right? Then all of a sudden we went full cycle. And, there wasn't a lot of seller financing in the early, from around 2016 to about 2024. I'm not saying none. I'm just saying that your story is more unique than not. When the virus came along and we started seeing inflation, I first developed this theory in about 2013, or excuse me, 2023, right? I developed this theory and I said, it's way more profitable to carry a note than it is have a rent house. And Ricardo, I'm in like all the biggest real estate masterminds, right? I would be considered the seller finance guy in those masterminds.
I agree 100%.
And I went to them and I said, guys, here's the thing and stuff. In 2023, Ricardo, nobody could hear me, right? Nobody could hear me. Like the way I'm going to gain wealth is I'm going to do the BRRRR model. I'm going to do rentals. I've got existing rentals. This is what I'm going to do. All of a sudden, Ricardo, by this year, I go to speak at the same real estate masterminds and they're giving me big awards. I win their innovator award, their go-giver award, their presentation award. Like, what the hell? And the answer is now all of a sudden the realization is set in. So let's pick on your hometown for a minute, Houston, Texas. Okay, because it's middle of the market. It's not California. It's not Toledo, Ohio, right? 2018, I buy a house in Houston in a decent neighborhood. And if I paid cash, I can make an 8% return on my investment per year after I pay all the expenses, right? That's called a capitalization rate, a cap rate. Correct. I could buy a rent house in Houston at an 8 cap. Go take me to any neighborhood in Houston today on the exact same model that you could make an 8 cap in 2018, and today you're making a 4 cap.
It's probably even less than that.
Well, I mean, so understand, landlords are, and here's what's wrong. What's wrong is not that you didn't do anything wrong. It's called inflation.
Your microphone went off, Eddie. I don't know what happened, but I can't hear you. And this is pretty good what you're talking about right now. So can't hear you. See if you can log out and log back in. It's okay. I'll keep people entertained here for a second. Yeah, I can't hear you. Hey, this is what happens when you do this live, guys. Now we will edit this for the online version, and we'll go from there. But what Mr. Eddie's talking about is pretty good because this is the difference in between a market that's going on the way up, what happens on a market when it's on the way up, and then what happens on a market when it's got inflation on it.
All right. Can you hear me
And
now?
now it's not on the way. Yeah, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay. All right, so let me go back just a little bit, just so the story's not too confusing.
Right.
So once again, landlords, what they really woke up and realized is their rent house and the model they had for so long and the model they had been taught, somebody moved their cheese.
Yes.
And the reason that happened was pretty simple. Now, once again, I'm picking on Houston, Texas, but this is pretty much true in most every market.
Correct.
Right? Everybody said rentals are how you sustain yourself in an inflationary market. Now, remember, I started in 1980 in a far more inflationary time than we have today. I don't remember happy landlords.
I'll be honest with you, Eddie. I've been a landlord, and I used to own 100 plus properties. I was not a happy landlord. I actually got
well, that's
to
because
that.
of pain. They were paying the butt, but you
They
were,
were.
but you could grow wealth. But the problem is this: if I can use my fingers,
Yes, you can.
Rents went up by this. Okay, rents went up. They went up higher than 20%. Now they settled back down, and rents went up about 20%. Now, Ricardo, I'm getting this information from fractional CFOs that do the math and do the books for hundreds of landlords. So I didn't just make this number up. And some of these people you know very well as I know them, and that you know they know the math. So here's expenses. Rents went up, but the problem is expenses did this. Expenses went up 50%. Rents went up 20%. Listen, I don't care. I don't know what you want to call it. Inflation drank your milkshake.
Yeah.
And so that's what that was the problem. And so now all of a sudden your house went up in value, but it went from 150,000 to 300,000, and you're not getting paid a dime for that increase in value.
But if you change it to an owner finance note that's structured correctly, now you're getting paid.
And that's my thesis. And I present this, Ricardo, as you know, to very seasoned real estate investors. So I'm not looking for the newbie. Listen, if you've already made your mind up in advance that your rental, nothing can beat your rental, I'm just going to say Godspeed to you, brother. I love you. But I can tell you this, I may not know much in this world, but I know this seller finance space.
Right.
And I saw the problem a couple of years ago, but now everybody's wanting to solve it. So I simply show a guy that has rentals how to convert it to seller financing. By the way, let me be clear about this. You're not selling to your tenant, right? You're selling to a new buyer with a good down payment and good credit and good income, and you're giving him home ownership. And you're essentially creating a loan origination product. Now, it's not Fannie Mae, not Freddie Mac. It's going to be more like a non-qualified mortgage product, which about 40% of all loan originations today, about 40% of all of those loans that originate today are non-QM loans, non-qualified mortgages.
Why? That's a great stat. Why do you think that's happening?
I can tell you exactly why it's happening, because can Fannie and Freddie tighten their underwriting standards. Before the virus, they have an index that Mortgage Bankers puts out. It's called the Mortgage Credit Availability Index. Before the virus, the day before the virus, right? In January of 2020. Yep. 185. Today it's at 95. So underwriting rates affected how many people could get a mortgage.
A lot. It affects.
But let me say this, equally affected are who can qualify for their standards. And that's what people, that's the little secret that people don't know. You know, I mean, look, they're not saying that in the nightly news, okay? Like people aren't walking around with a general awareness that this was happening in the market. What I'm saying is all very provable statistical information.
Of course.
Right? So it's not like I'm just, this old crazy man's making this crazy stuff up. I just recognized the problem. And I recognized this really is what entrepreneurs do. You recognize a market void and you figure out if you can fix it. That's what I did. And then I come in with various programs of how they can liquidate part of their financing. You don't have to liquidate all of it. You can liquidate part of your financing. So that gives you enough money to pay off your underlying debt, right? It gives you all these things. And I guarantee you, I will challenge the crap out of a BRRRR model. You take a straight up BRRRR deal and take a seller finance deal and liquidating part of the note today, I'm going to say that I'm going to win way more than 50% of the time. Not 100%, but I'm going to win way more than 50% of the time. You're going to make more money with my model.
Now, what are so as a landlord, right? You get appreciation, then you get depreciation, and this is what the BRRRR people they promote. Hey, you get the appreciation on the asset, you get the depreciation on your taxes, on your yearly taxes, right? What are the pros and cons from, or I wouldn't say cons, but how does the note investing compares to offset the appreciation and the depreciation?
Well, let me say this. Anytime you're in a podcast and a guy's trying to talk with his hands, right? It's a little difficult to beat this up to the level that you need to beat it up.
Right.
But I can prove mathematically what I'm saying, right? I'm going to give your audience a chance to come to a little master class and we'll whiteboard it out and I can prove the math. But let me generally say what is the case. Depreciation is a deferral.
Right.
It is not forgiveness of taxes.
100%.
Okay. So that's the first thing is if you can get a deferral on how you pay the gain on a property, you get, instead of depreciation, you don't have to pay all your gain up front. And you get that when you do seller financing because you can take installment sales. The second thing is the depreciation you've already taken. If you sell it for cash, the IRS says, hey, dude, we want our money back. You depreciated it, and that was a lie. It didn't appreciate. And so now all of a sudden, we want the depreciation back. We all know that's called recapture, right?
Right.
Okay, well, you can take long-form depreciation over time and pay it back over the life of the loan. So there's a couple of different tax hacks that a lot of people are unaware of. The second thing is you get money. And so people say, well, I don't get appreciation. I'm like, yeah, you get appreciation. You just get paid for it now.
You're going to pay for it today.
If you can get a 15% down payment on a $250,000 house and you model a note model and a rental model, in the first year, you're going to get $50,000 today you wouldn't get on a rental. On 5 years, you're going to get $100,000 in cash that you don't get on a rental on a $250,000 house. Now, let me say this. People say, yeah, but I don't get appreciation. I'm like, okay, well, if you wait 10 years, what is the present value of waiting 10 years for the money? If you're going to get the money in 10 years, what is that money worth today? And so I do those computations. It's just math, right? It's not like it's brain surgery.
I love that you brought that term to net present value. A lot of people don't think about that number.
So at an 8% interest rate over 10 years, it's 38 cents on the dollar. So if you're owed $10,000 in 10 years, what's it worth today? It's worth 38 cents on the dollar. So understand that we've sort of, as an industry, been programmed a little bit. We've been programmed into this is how you make money and this is how you build wealth. And what I'm saying is inflation moved our cheese. There is a way to gain wealth. There is a way to do things. It just may not be the exact same maze that you were originally taught.
This is amazing, Eddie. Because I have a property right now that I don't have a property. My wife has a property that she's renting, and she's not too happy with that property and the tenant, of course, because the tenant is about to get evicted, basically. And I told her, I said, so I'll give you roughly what the numbers are. Okay, the property is roughly worth on the market ARV wise, let's say $145,000. It's a small frame home in Wharton, Texas.
Okay.
And she owes 50 on it right now.
Okay.
Right. So plenty of equity there. So if she had to go sell it on the regular market, she can get rid of it. She makes $1,200 a month on the rental. And what she's been doing is she's been paying it off because she wants to have it paid for. Basically, that's her strategy, right? But she's having a headache with the tenant, so I'm like, look, I think you need to owner finance this thing.
Well, I have built a spreadsheet, and by the way, if you'll come to this master class, I'll give it to you.
When is the master class?
It's online. It's a virtual. It's like a 2-hour thing, and it's online. You just register. I'm going to make it really simple. You go to noteschool.com/Eddie class, EDDIE, Eddie class.
Noteschool.com/Eddie, EDDIE.
That's right.
All right. Let me see if that's correct, Eddie. I'm going to show it here. Is that right?
Yeah.
Noteschool.com//Eddie
class.
Oh, Eddie class. All right, let's put it correctly. So noteschool.com/Eddie class. All right, that's the right one. This is the second one, guys, not the first one. So
okay, cool.
This is the one. So
Ricardo, here's what I'm going to say to your wife. Look, there's no need in speculating. Go in there and tell me fair market value and rent and what you net out of the rent, and it'll model a note model. Now, your property is going to have to meet your property, and your buyer is going to have to meet a standard in order for that note to have a secondary market value. Okay.
Right.
So not everybody gets a trophy here. Okay.
Right.
So it's got to meet a certain standard, and we help people do that. My note buying business, not my school, but my note buying business will help people go through the path and connect them with people that can do, vendors that can do the work. I don't want you just to go find your own vendors. Let me go find them. I know who I think does a good job, and I know who I think's a shortcutter. Right. And so I'm going to help you with how you paper it. I'm going to help you with how you structure it. I'm going to help you with how you define the underwriting. Don't give the RMLO, just don't tell them to underwrite it. Underwrite it to my specifications.
Right.
And so with that, then all of a sudden, I'm going to say that I bet you my best pair of Texas cowboy boots that your wife goes, oh, crap. You mean I can net that much money and not have to be a landlord?
Right.
And the answer is, I'm going to say that that's what she's going to say.
I agree 100%, Eddie. I'm actually a fan of owner financing myself. Because I just don't like being a landlord. Period. I don't like the phone calls on a Sunday. I don't like the oh my God, come fix this light bulb. Hey, it's on the contract that you're supposed to change the light bulbs, not me. This is not an apartment complex. I don't like any of those things. And then when the tenant quits paying, then you got to go through an eviction process that almost costs the same as a foreclosure.
Well, there's two competing forces with rentals over the past 15 years. One thing was, I hate to jack with the rent management, but rentals make a lot of money and are very good to me and are a great wealth strategy offsetting just making transactional income of flipping properties, right? So I'm fully acknowledging that rentals have been good to people.
Yes.
But rentals were making 8% and now they're making 4% on the same house.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, what you see is wait a minute, the economic model that everybody was convinced rentals are the savior, the economic model has changed. And once again, I don't want to fight with somebody about it. Come join the master class. Let us give you a spreadsheet, and you can go run your own math.
You're right. By the way, that link, Eddie, I don't know why it's not coming up on me. It says no results found, but let's see if we can get it fixed. That way, I want to do that master class because I
All
want to
right,
go and I want.
you're killing me. That I didn't know we were going to film this morning, so I didn't have the link set up, but I thought
Hey,
that would
no
work.
worries because it will be fixed by the time we go and
Yeah.
edit the notes and all of that, right?
Yeah, so
So
we'll get it straight, and it's about a 2-hour class, and we talk about two things. We talk about the competing forces of renting versus carrying a note versus seller financing. We talk about those forces, and we give you enough basis of knowledge to kind of challenge your own math on your own deal. And if renting wins, Godspeed to you, brother.
of course,
But
renting has a place in the marketplace. Now, I'm not gonna
for
say
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not everybody should sell their whole rental portfolio. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying to you that equally now, I think seller financing is a model. And the other thing is we show people things about notes they wouldn't consider. Because a lot of your audience is sitting there like, hi, he's talking about selling part of a note. And how would that work? And I can't see that. Well, that's because we're going to need to slow down and get on a whiteboard and show and map out a process. I'm not going to be able to explain it all with my hands, not at a level that makes sense. But that's why, what we have been really successful in doing today is that we have been able to talk about the why the logic is worth testing, because that's the first thing. People are saying I'm unhappy with my rent houses, and they're like, well, should I do something different?
Let me ask you one last question because I know we're running out of time, Eddie.
Okay.
Is note investing for everybody?
No, because some people don't have any seed money to start with. There's a number of leveraging techniques you can use to buy notes. So people think I can leverage a rent house, but I can't leverage a note. That's a myth. That's not a truth. But some people that are beginners and they're starting out and they got no money, well, they can't invest in notes, right?
What if they become good at finding the notes?
Well, that's a note hustler. That's a different question. I started out as a note hustler. I didn't have any money. I was just hustling notes for somebody else, right? And so, yeah, I mean, of course we know how to do it. That's how I got started, right? But note investing is a matter of learning how to utilize your resources, learning some of these techniques. And by the way, if you're creating your own notes and you have no awareness in the market of how selling a stream of payments of note or selling part of a payment of a note, or you have no concept of how that works, then I'm just saying to you that you are completely missing the most valuable part of the business.
Which is then I heard Ray Sasser say this one time in one of his areas. Is the deal after the deal is what he called it. I'm pretty sure he picked that up from you, or because he was talking about
I
that.
can tell you that I have said that 10,000 times. So I would say he probably picked that saying up from me.
I guarantee it was from you because that's why I mentioned it. I knew you were going to pick up on it. It was the deal after the deal, and he started talking about partials and selling, and I was like, back then I was like, what is this? It's like something went over my head, right? Like, okay, I thought I was a real estate investor, but obviously, I got a lot more to learn. So, Eddie, thank you so much for being here today, sir. I appreciate you. We're gonna make sure that link works for you guys. If it doesn't work, don't stress over. Put a note on the comments below. I will get in contact with Eddie and we'll get the right link. I personally want to do that class, Eddie, because I think I got a lot to learn from you when it comes to creating notes. Even though I've created my own notes in the past, that doesn't mean I did them right. That doesn't mean I maximized what I could have done. And what's better to learn from someone that's got the experience, the authority, and the trajectory like you are, Eddie. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Guys, the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast with Mr. Eddie Speed. Don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. Also, at 10 Grove, Tampa, Florida, June 27th, 28th, only for 200 people. I'm looking forward to see you there. Thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate you.
You're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.